My name is Ben Lauer, and I'm the product manager for extensibility here at Tableau. And with me today, I've got a few awesome folks and one not so awesome. I'm kidding. Actually, with me today, on the slide here, you can see we've got Brendan Lee, and Brendan's going to talk a little bit here in a minute. He's the product manager for Web Data Connector at Tableau, and that's why you're all here, is to talk about that. We've also got two of the engineers for the Web Data Connector. We've got Matthew Gumport and Sam Desmond with us. We'll hear from them during the Q&A phase of the session today. Also with us, we've got Mike Pope and Jared Dominguez from our docs team. And so these guys are very familiar with the APIs. They write our docs. They have a lot of patience working with our devs to get all of the information out of them and into the docs. And so we might hear from those guys today as well. And so we do want you guys thinking about your questions when we get into that phase. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan. He's going to talk about the Web Data Connector. He's going to give us an update on kind of where we are, and then give a preview of the brand new V2 API. After we do that, we're going to switch gears. We'll get into the Q&A phase, and then we'll wrap up at the end. We're scheduled to go to 11:30. We're happy to end early if the questions all get answered. So that's our plan. So with that, I'll give it to Brendan.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to talk to you all about the Web Data Connector, what we've been doing the last year, and where we're headed in the next year. So why did we build the Web Data Connector? I'm just going to start at the beginning. Here at Tableau, we aim to be data agnostic. We want to use Tableau to connect to the data you care about, regardless of where that data lives. Natively, we connect to a large amount of data sources, but there are thousands and thousands of data sources in the world that we don't connect to. That's why we built this platform, to help you as a developer to go out and connect to the data you care about. So this was introduced in 10.1, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've done since then. Sorry, introduced in 9.1, my apologies. So in 9.1, we released the Web Data Connector. A lot of you went and played with it. We've seen hundreds of connectors get built on this platform. Later on during the year, we introduced version 1.1.1. With that, we introduced a brand new Web Data Connector simulator. We got a lot of feedback during the initial release that these things were a little bit challenging to build. So this new simulator helped us address some of those problems. We also moved all of our content to GitHub. We aim to be as open source as possible with all the content that we can put out there. Upcoming here, later this year, we're introducing the WDC version 2.0, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. We have a bunch of great new features coming at you with 2.0, and I'm excited to share those with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we've been doing recently, just to dive in a tiny bit. So like I said, we built this new simulator a few months ago. This allows you as a developer to go in and debug the different phases of the Web Data Connector platform independently. It also honestly looked a lot nicer, which was a plus. And another big thing that happened with that release was that we now supported OAuth flows in the Web Data Connector simulator. Previously, we were hosting your content in an iframe, which didn't allow for you to debug any of your Web Data Connectors that used OAuth. We've also released a large number of bug fixes in the past year. We got a lot of your feedback that some things just weren't quite working properly, and we went and addressed those first and foremost. I call that one specifically here that I know affected a lot of developers. Previously, we didn't render radio buttons or checkboxes in your Web Data Connectors on a Mac. We've gone and fixed that one and a number of others that will be really important. And last, we have ported all of the SDK to GitHub. That means that we have the simulator up on GitHub. We have all of our sample code up on GitHub. We're happy to take any contributions and answer any issues up there. This will also allow us in the future to iterate much faster. So some cool things we can do now that we have our content up on GitHub, we can release API previews. And we've already gone and done that, actually, and I'll talk about that more in the future. It's also going to allow us to iterate a lot faster on sample code and documentation. And lastly, another thing I'm really excited about is that this provides us a place to share and view community-created connectors. So when a developer goes and builds a nice web data connector, they now have a platform to share this with the rest of the world. So now I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's coming in version 2.0 of the Web Data Connector. This is coming out in Tableau 10, our next major release. And the cool thing is you can actually start using it today on GitHub. We have a new multi-table branch that you can go and play with this new API. There's a new simulator to back the new functionality, and I'm going to walk you through all of this. But first, I'm going to show you a little demo of what this is going to look like in Tableau 10. So these are all screenshots, subject to change, but just to give you an idea of what we're building. So this is a demo of what the new multi-table functionality is going to look like. In Tableau 10, you'll go and open a new connection just like you would before. Connect to the web data connector of your choice. In this example, we have a JSON multiple table connector. It basically just goes and pulls 5 different random JSON tables. In Tableau 10, after you finish interacting with your web data connector in the interactive phase, you'll be brought back to the data prep screen where you'll see all the tables that your web data connector has brought back. You'll see those 5 tables on the left. Now, just like with any of our other connections, you can drag one table out to the data prep screen. And you can now drag a second table out to the data prep screen and join those 2 tables. Once you've done that and created your data source, you can go in and start working with your data. So we're really excited about this feature. We think it will offer a lot more functionality to your web data connectors and allow you to do a lot more powerful stuff with the platform. Another really cool feature we're adding in Web Data Connector 2.0 is the ability to define additional metadata about your fields that you're bringing back. So in this screen right here, Tableau 919293 is kind of shown on the left here, and this is what you'd experience currently with our platform. The only thing you can really tell us about your fields is what data type they are. So you can tell us, hey, this column's a string, this column is a date time object. In Tableau 10, we're really expanding this functionality and allowing you to tell us a lot more about your column.
Before you advance and give it away, I think you should do a quiz and see who can spot the difference in these 2 screenshots. It's very subtle, but it's very important to the Tableau user. Anyone want to put into the chat window? Do they see the difference? Well, go ahead and review.
All right. So one thing we've added in this new metadata feature is the ability to specify default formatting for your fields. So you'll notice here on the left, we have this stock quotes connector that brings back the stock price for a given stock ticker, and it's just formatted as a basic number. On the right here with Tableau 10, you'll be able to tell us that that is in fact a currency, and we'll format that directly. We've also had a lot of additional metadata options. You can tell us if your fields are dimensions or measures. You can tell us if it is a discrete or continuous field. You can specify default aggregation. Basically, anything you can do in Tableau when you're defining your data model, you'll be able to do through our API. So this is going to save your users a ton of time when they're working with your web data connector, and you can kind of provide them with best practices. The third thing I'm going to demo is our new simulator that we're releasing with version 2.0 of the API. So this, as I mentioned, is actually live on GitHub right now. So if you go to GitHub, you'll notice our normal page here. But if you come in here and switch to our development branch, which is where we're actively developing these new features, you'll notice a lot more content. We've completely redone the samples, and we have a new simulator for you to play with. This works just as before, and I'm going to show that real quick to you right now. So here's what the new simulator looks like in 10.0. You'll notice it looks very similar to the current model, but one thing has changed significantly, and that's the ability for the simulator to bring back multiple tables. So this is the same JSON multi-table connector that I demoed earlier within Tableau. In the simulator, here's what it looks like. You launch your web data connector in the interactive phase, and now there's no input for us to grab in this interactive phase, so I'm just going to say get data. And the simulator is actually going to go out and fetch metadata about each of the tables I specified in my web data connector. So you'll notice down here, there are 5 tables again, just like I showed you earlier. And you can go and fetch independently for each of these tables the data you want. So for this first users table, I'm going to run the data gathering phase, and you'll notice I've brought back all the data from my users. We provide some convenience functions, so if you wanted to fetch all the data at the same time, you can do that as well. And then one other thing I wanted to call out real quick before we move on. In this branch, you'll find this new API reference down here at the bottom, beta docs. This is going to show you all the new API contracts that you'll have to work with in the WDC version 2. We're currently in the process of redoing our entire documentation to support the new API, and that'll be coming real soon.
So Brendan, could you spend just a couple more minutes and talk and share what parts in GitHub are we really able to take pull requests on, and maybe things that we can't? So for example, we have the Tableau Web Data Connector library, JavaScript library, and we're not really taking PRs on that. However, like samples, docs, README, I mean, what's really available for people to help us with here?
That's a great question, Ben. Thank you. So if you come back here to our GitHub repository, almost everything in here we can take pull requests on. So we're happy to take pull requests on samples. Even if you have new samples to add, please submit a pull request. We can take pull requests on the simulator. So if you have any bug fixes or minor improvements, let us know. We take pull requests on these start scripts if those were relevant. And then another big thing that we'd love to take pull requests on in the future is, well, here, let me go back to master real quick. On master, you'll notice that we have this down here at the bottom, this list of community web data connectors. A lot of you actually may have submitted connectors to this list. So our current process for that is you edit the README and submit that as a pull request. In the future, we're going to be doing something very similar, except we're going to take that list and compile it into a nice user-facing gallery of connectors. So in 10.0, if you want to submit a pull request to add one of your connectors to that list, that would be awesome. The only thing we can't take pull requests to is the actual JSAP, the actual shim object. So you'll notice this file right here, which actually defines the API contracts we use. We're not able to take pull requests on this file because it interfaces with our platform code. But everything besides that is fair game. Cool. All right, coming back to the slideshow. All right. And that's it for me. So thank you all again for coming. I think we're going to move on to the question portion of this talk. So I'm going to give that back to Ben.
All right, great. So we had some questions that people, emailed us. We had a question submitted on the forum this morning. So I actually want to do that one first. So let's see, before we move on, these are questions people emailed. The question that was submitted through the forum last night was from Craig Bloodworth. And let me just go ahead and read this to everyone, and then you guys can weigh in here. So Craig says APIs are often designed to be queries multiple times across multiple endpoints. For instance, querying public transport locations, selecting a number of these locations, and then querying some kind of activity endpoint. APIs are less commonly designed for extracting all of the system's data. With that in mind, can you foresee a more iterative data collection process via the WDC? This would mean an initial WDC or standard database connection, selection of one or more marks in Tableau, which would then be passed as data objects into an additional WDC connection. So maybe you could elaborate, Brendan, a little bit on sort of this new model of defining the schema and being more iterative in how we fetch data, but then have we thought about, something beyond that that would maybe address, Craig's use case here?
Yeah, I think a good place to start, actually, I think, Sam, you should talk about this, is our new API for getting data. I think that having that background will help solve half of that question, and then I'll talk about moving forward where we're going.
Yeah, so as part of our 10.0 work, we added the multi-table API. The current implementation is basically you have several objects that you can pull back, and right now you're going to be asked, as Craig said, to pull back all the data for those objects. One of the things we're looking to do in the future is to pass information to the Web Data Connector about the previous objects you had gathered. So if you were, for example, looking at a list of posts on a blog or something like that, and that was your main API, you might get the last 30 days worth of posts, and you might also want to get the users who commented on these posts. And by passing by first gathering the collection of posts, and then we can pass down all the users who had commented. So you don't have to get all the users that are on the blogging site, you would just have to get the users that you care about. And so this is kind of our one of the ways we're looking to move forward is more at the data extract side, is to allow the web data connectors to kind of pass some context down to filter their data in that way. We haven't thought about the selecting marks as a filter, but it's a really cool concept that we'll definitely think about.
Other than that, we've also been exploring some different ideas of using parameters in Tableau to filter your extract that you're bringing back. We've explored using a prompts concept similar to some of our other data sources. Yeah, we haven't looked at the filtering by marks example explicitly, but Craig, I'd love to catch up with you later and talk more about that use case.
It's definitely an idea that we've put a lot of thought into, and as we've written these ourselves, we've gotten more and more experience seeing the limitations of APIs. And as we see more of these limitations, I think we get more creative in how we can extend our API to help work around these things and have people create the vises that they want from the data sources they're connecting to.
Cool. So just a reminder, chat window in the WebEx meeting is open for business. So if we've said something thus far that doesn't make sense, you have a question, you want to go deeper on something, please just go ahead and use the chat window, enter your questions. We've got the experts on this platform here to answer anything that you've got. We've got another question here. We're showing on the slide. How do I deal with CORS issues? Maybe for people, if there's anyone on the call who's not familiar with CORS, maybe you could just say a little bit about what that is and kind of how that bites us as developers, and then talk about maybe mitigation strategies or just how I deal with that.
So CORS, as kind of a introduction to it, is a web security policy that is mostly used when you're interacting with the browser in day-to-day usage.
Stands for cross-origin resource sharing, right?
Yes. Or yes. Okay. I think so. And so basically, what this would be, let's say you were on Tableau.com and we had some JavaScript running. The JavaScript from Tableau.com could potentially go try to reach out to a different web server. Let's say Google has an API and we're trying to go reach that on different domains. In the web security model, this can be considered unsafe for Google's API because this client-side JavaScript from a different domain is going to try to talk to their API. And the way you would get around this normally is Google allows their API to be accessed from different origins. And so the issue that a lot of people have seen with web data connectors is when the API they're trying to talk to does not have this capability enabled.
But just to interject for a second. So it's not like if I'm building a web data connector, I'm going to get bitten by a CORS. It really depends the data source to which I'm trying to connect, right? Because like we've seen plenty of data sources that have no authentication, like governmental data, this whole open data movement. A lot of those you can just hit because taxpayers were funding that, right? So it's basically the data source I'm hitting would have some type of restriction potentially.
Exactly. It's all up to the data source that you're attempting to talk to. And so there's a couple potential workarounds to get around this issue. The first one is if you're working with an internal team, if you're building one of these for your company and you own the API and the endpoints you're trying to communicate with, you can ask. It's pretty easy from a API provider point of view to enable cross-origin requests to their server. It can either be from just the domain where your web data connector is hosted, or it could be from everywhere. The other option is if it's a public API is to contact their support forums. So a lot of times people have run into these same issues. There's two common techniques that will get recommended. The first is something called JSON-P, which will allow you to is just basically designed to get around CORS issues. The other potential option is a little bit more work, and it would be using a proxy server to actually request the data. So this gets around the cross-origin issue because the resource you're talking to is your proxy server, and then your proxy server will talk to the data source you're looking to talk to.
Yeah, so I just want to point out that this proxy server that Sam's mentioning, we have an existing sample that Brendan wrote that connects to Foursquare, and that's using a proxy server approach. So that's on GitHub. So if you get stuck or you want to, just, like I always like to have a nice starter project that I can go and just change things around. That Foursquare OAuth sample would be a good one to see the proxy server approach.
Just to be clear on that example, that current sample is only doing authentication through the proxy server, so it'd take a little tweaking to actually make data requests through the proxy server as well, but it's a very similar model.
Yep.
I believe that we have another example. There's a couple of public services that will do this as well, and I think a few example, one of the examples I know is using a proxy.
I'm not sure. We do have it in our documentation. A couple suggested. Thank you, awesome docs team. So we have a couple suggested resources for these third-party proxy services.
Yeah. Mike, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say everything that Sam was talking about cores is in the docs.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Everything that Sam was saying about cores is in the docs for those who didn't want to try to get it all right now. So just look up cores in the WDC docs and we go through all the same stuff.
Great, thank you. So let's see here. We've got a comment from Craig just about cores is it's there for a good reason. So Craig's comment is it's there for security. And let's see, saying that, for instance, in OAuth, you shouldn't put your secret key in client-side code. And so that's a really good point. And actually, the sample that we did, the Foursquare sample, did we put the key in there, or did we put it in a separate config file?
So the Foursquare sample we have in our docs is actually doing client-only OAuth, so there's no secret involved. We have, if anyone needs an additional sample, I have one myself that does the full OAuth song and dance with your secret stored on the proxy server. We don't have that published yet. We will have that published in 10.0, so stay tuned. But if you need it immediately, let me know, and I'd be happy to provide that to you. It's on GitHub.
Yeah. But basically, the message there is that proxy server can actually serve a lot of functions. One of them is also a way to protect any secrets, right? So the user's not getting that information. It's as long as your proxy server is secure, your secret should be safe. So we got another question that was just sent in on the chat. So let's see, Dimitri is saying, I have a question tied to degradation of performance with the increase in the size of the batch/column count. So far, our results show more or less linear degradation with columns count increasing, which makes sense. However, we observed n-squared degradation with the batch size increase. And then he says going from 1,000 to 2,000 to 4,000, etc. And that increases the time as, 1x, 4x, and 16x. Obviously, it makes it challenging to deal with Web Data Connector when incremental key is not possible. Is this expected behavior?
Can I clarify real quick?
Yeah.
So linear degradation for column count increase, n-squared degradation for what?
Batch size, basically the number of rows.
Okay, for rows.
I'd be interested to, so we did some performance testing on that ourselves, and we had seen performance improvement actually with the larger the batch size was. So the column size we did expect, and we've seen that as well. But I haven't seen a degradation from larger batches.
But when you say batch, you mean we're getting 1,000 rows at a time and sending those in the for loop back to Tableau?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I know one connector I built, I was just experimenting and I tried 500 rows at a time, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, and 5,000 seemed to be the sweet spot for this particular data source I was using. So like how do developers sort of work through this? Is it just trial and error, or?
One thing to consider too is if the API you're using is rate limiting you, that's just one thing to look out for. And another thing before we move on with talking about more performance more, I just wanted to clarify, we do support incremental refresh. I wasn't sure if that's what he was suggesting by his comment, but we do have an incremental refresh mechanism with WDC.
It might just be that that particular connection they couldn't.
Yeah.
So that was my point. So when you were doing that, was there so the sweet spot has to do with the API provider or it has to do with us?
That's a good question. The API that I was using, I could get up to 30,000 rows at a time back from them. That's what they allowed. And I could specify, I think the default for this API was 100. And then I had to specify additional parameter to override that. And so for mine, it was 5,000 seemed to be the sweet spot. So I think Brendan's comment's interesting about rate limiting, but I think we should move on here. And I would just say to Dimitri, maybe we could take this offline and we could be a little bit more helpful in your specific case. If you could give us a little bit more information, like what would you want to see, Sam?
I mean, if the connector is public, I'd love to just try it ourselves. If not, we'd love to work closely and see exactly which version of Tableau we're using and get a few of the details like that. Like, it'd be great to reach out.
Yeah, so Dimitri, if you can send us like a private message here and let us know how we can kind of follow up with you, we'd love to do that.
Can I summarize, however, our answer is we haven't seen this exact problem. Or we don't, this is unexpected. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's not an issue that we've seen in particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oops.
Okay, so I like it. It seems like people have found the chat window, so I appreciate people or maybe people have had enough morning coffee if you're on the West Coast like us and you're finally awake. So let's see. Craig has said that he's got a PHP proxy code for a web data connector if people are interested in that. He's posted stuff to our GitHub page. And he's in the forum, so he should be easy to find if you're interested in a PHP proxy. So DJ asks, will there be an XML and JSON WDC that does not use external sites like cores.io or the Yahoo API? Our servers are internal only.
We have no plans in the work to build JSON or XML web data connectors that don't use external servers. I know that at Tableau in general, there are people that are looking at this problem outside of web data connector, but our team itself doesn't have any plans right now to do that.
Yeah, and again, this maybe is another good call to our GitHub page. If someone in the community is interested in modifying the examples we have out there now, that might be a great opportunity to enhance the current example we have for our JSON XML connectors. But yeah, we don't have any particular plans for that one that I know of.
Okay. So DJ, maybe you could share more, but I'm wondering if you're just looking for a better sample to help you understand how you would connect to your own internal server. Is that part of this question, maybe? Because I think the only JSON one that we've posted, right, is where I put the blob of JSON in, or I can connect to an external URL.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, DJ, if you can share more information about your internal use case, maybe we could be a little bit more helpful and directive. But it should be doable to write a WDC that connects to your internal servers and fetches back XML. You can convert that in your WDC to JSON or getting the JSON back. So let us know if we can be more prescriptive there. Craig did post a link to his PHP code. I went ahead and posted that in the chat window. So if you're interested in that proxy code, you can find that in the chat window. Shaw asks, the multi-table WDC you are using in this demo, is it included in your 10.0 beta release? So the answer to that, Shah, is yes. It's actually on GitHub now in the dev branch. And so you can go and take a look at that. Brendan, you want to say something?
Yeah, let me clarify real quick. So there's the Tableau beta program in general where, we release versions of desktop earlier. Our current beta is outside that process. We're just all on GitHub. We have these samples and this new simulator up on GitHub, as Ben mentioned. So right now it's outside of the main beta process. So you won't currently be able to use V2 web data connectors within the Tableau 10 beta. In a future beta of Tableau 10, you will be able to, and we can definitely spread the word on that when it's available. But for now, the beta is explicitly on GitHub, and that's it.
So can you say that again? That means that if you can create a 10.0 WDC, but at the moment you will not be able to use it inside of Tableau. Correct. Until the 10.0 beta is available to them.
Until a later 10.0 beta.
Because we've already shipped the first beta of Tableau 10.
Yep.
But we just haven't activated this new web data connector feature in the beta. So I think the message there is stay tuned for the future beta where we do activate it. But yes, go and start building your web data connector with the new API using the simulator on GitHub. Yeah. That's available.
Yeah, so one of our goals with getting this stuff on GitHub is that we can give previews to the community sooner. So as soon as we have a new API, we'll release it. You guys can give us feedback, and we'll be able to iterate a lot quicker.
Okay, so let's jump to, we've got another question here that was sent in via email. What are the ways I can handle authentication?
Yeah, I can take that. So right now, I think what this question is kind of addressing is the fact that once there are plenty of ways to handle authentication when you're running the web data connector in desktop. But you need to be a little bit careful in how you do this, because otherwise, if you try to publish it to the server and you expect it to just work, it might not. The reason for that is if you have like a short-lived OAuth token and you try to save that into the connection data field as part of the API and then try to use that in the server refresh, that might not work because the OAuth token might be expired. So the tips that we normally have for people trying to handle authentication are to make sure that you automate as much of that as possible. So whenever you're trying to authenticate and if you want these to work on the server, you should be sure that the web data connector can authenticate and do whatever token passing or username password stuff with the data source itself with as minimal user interaction as possible. So if you want to publish your connection to server, you should be very careful about what you expect to work. And be very careful when you're trying to authenticate against an OAuth data source that uses short-lived tokens, and try to make, in some cases, you're going to have your connector be able to run the authentication flow for you. This is something they're actually looking into, and we're really excited about the changes that we're going to make, because there are a lot of ways that we're looking at making this easier for developers in the future. So hopefully, you guys won't need to jump through hoops to get it to work on the server. But for handling authentication right now, it really comes down to writing some code to make your connector do it on each run, as opposed to expecting whatever short-lived tokens you have to continue to work.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, please.
So OAuth, whatever, you've got tokens. If you have a WDC that relies on user password credentials, and works great in desktop, how can you even automate that on the server?
So if it works with username and password credentials, you don't have to do anything to make it work on server. It just will. If you save the username and password into the username and password field as part of the API, we'll store the password securely. We blank that out and don't look at it ever. It gets stored encrypted. And when it runs on server, it's just going to use those same fields that you passed us. And we'll be able to handle all that very nicely. When you're dealing with tokens, that's when things get complicated in the way that I just attempted to describe.
Yeah, I mean, personally, when I decide I want to make a new web data connector to some data source, I just cross my fingers that they don't require auth at all. Because that's the easiest way to deal with auth is no auth.
In that vein, we've also simplified the auth. We've also simplified how you tell us about auth in the next version of the API. So right now, it's a little bit of a guessing game, whether you'll see the username password prompt or whether you see the auth phase of the WDC. In V2, we've actually added a field to make this explicit, so you tell Tableau directly if you're using no authentication, basic authentication, which is username or password, or if you're using custom authentication, which most likely will mean no auth. So we kind of tried to make the API cleaner in that regard, so it's a little bit more straightforward.
This is also going to end up with better experience when you're just like opening up an old workbook and you need to re-authenticate instead of having like an expired data source that you can't refresh. You should see like the right prompt and have users be able to put in their own credentials and see their version of that data. And there are improvements to how this is going to work on server down the pipeline as well.
Yeah. Okay, so Dimitri posted a follow-up in the chat. It says, another operational issue we ran into is tied to the deployment of a web data connector onto Tableau server. As we know, HTML has to be manually extracted and deployed into server to allow automatic refresh. The issue is tied with us updating the web data connector code. Currently, it means that we have to manually contact all clients using this web data connector and ask them to manually reload the file. So a small wish, make it easier for other users to do this, or ideally to automate this.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about whitelisting?
Well, so let me, before you jump into that, we did say that this is questions from the community. Craig Bloodworth, I will say, has made a plea. Please allow us to whitelist remote web data connectors on our own servers. So maybe if you're going to talk about whitelisting, you could address both of those.
Yeah, well, Craig, I'm happy to announce we will have a whitelisting feature coming very soon in our next release. So we realize that the current importing process is very inflexible at times. We've changed how that works. And in the future release of Tableau, we will be adding a whitelisting command to tab admin. So what you'll be able to do is go in and say, okay, for this server, I trust the connector that's hosted at xyz.com. So instead of having to manually import the HTML every time you make a change, you can just whitelist that specific location. There'll be a little bit more. There's a further security mechanism. I don't know if we want to dive into right now, but in general, that's what it's gonna look like.
Cool. And do you think, does that address Dimitri's concerns as well?
So for Dimitri's situation, he could just host this connector at dimitriswebsite.com, and all of his users would use the tab admin command to whitelist dimitrisserver.com as a connector they trust. And then whenever he pushes changes, they'll just automatically hit it. So there will be no manual process. It's just going to be served as a new file. So it should make this part of the server experience much simpler.
I got a little bit confused. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. So when you said dimitrisserver.com, I think you're assuming that Dimitri has written a web data connector and is hosting it at dimitri.com.
Yes.
I'm going to shorten the URL. I like short URLs. So he's hosting it at dimitri.com, and he's told the world of Tableau users, hey, use my web data connector. They've used tab admin to import it today and approve it. You're saying the new whitelisting process, if they just add on the step of whitelisting dimitri.com, they don't have to do anything else. Like, they'll just be current as he makes changes.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
There is that old flow. There is a current flow to get that connector hosted on Tableau server.
And that's what he's using now.
Okay.
Import. Yeah, the import. Yeah.
Re-import.
Yeah, you have to keep re-importing it every time you make a change.
Yeah, that's a little bit onerous.
Yeah. Don't make changes.
Don't make changes. Yeah, great. Okay, so Dimitri, hopefully that that addresses your question, and hopefully will make you happy. Craig, hopefully you're happier. So Craig's clarifying whitelist in 10.0.
Yes. In that regard, just quick plug. If anyone is interested in beta testing that, reach out. I'd love to get it out to you earlier in a beta. Definitely do that.
Yep. Great. So Craig said, yes, please sign him up.
Okay. I'll catch up with you, Greg.
So let's see here. DJ says a use case. I think this is back to DJ's earlier question about the internal servers and using an XML and JSON. So he's given us a little bit more info here. So as a use case, querying a Jenkins CI XML API URL using the XML web data connector. The result is the following instead of the data, and he gets back string, int, date, time. Yeah, DJ, maybe we could take this offline. I think we can probably get you on the right path here. This seems like it should be doable.
Yeah, I have noticed that the specific third party we used in that sample has returned weird results at times. So I think it's just
that sample's just like out of date now or something. Okay, yeah. So Diram is asking, while doing page loading, is there a way to see data that is loaded during the paging phase before seeing all data?
This is another thing that we really wanted to put into the API. I don't think it's going to come in our next release, but it's definitely one of the top features that we want to have, is to have an API as part of the web data connector interface where a connector could report its status. So say you can go talk to your data source and there's going to be 1 million rows returned, and you can only get them 1,000 rows at a time. You can basically send a message that will show to the user and say, update progress, and it would say fetching row 2,000 of 1 million.
Yeah.
Just to give the user some idea of their
Go
progress.
get coffee.
Yeah. So this would be an API that'd be very open. The connector would be able to basically pass an arbitrary string to our platform code, and we would show that in the progress dialog to the user.
Okay.
We investigated it. A few of the other changes to the API we thought were a little higher priority, but this is definitely something that we want to get into the API, and we're hoping to get there soon, but it will not be part of our upcoming release.
Okay.
Will it support emoticons? That's what I want to know.
I think it'll be easy.
Arbitrary.
Yeah, arbitrary string.
Perfect.
You can put a coffee emoji in there.
Let's see here. Prashanti is asking, is there a difference in how web data connector works in the simulator versus the desktop? Our code works fine in the simulator, but times out on desktop.
Yes, unfortunately, there are a number of discrepancies between the simulator and the Tableau desktop. It's something that we are aware is a problem. It can be very frustrating for developers, and when we can, we try and fix those differences. So that's something we're aware of as a problem. We're working on it. For the specific timeout issue, I'm not exactly sure what could be the cause of that. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, so we definitely understand this being frustrating for developers. We've felt the pain ourselves. We do have a YouTube video on our YouTube channel that I made discussing techniques for debugging web data connectors inside of Tableau. There's a couple things you can do by looking at logs and breaking some things out that might get you closer to seeing what the issue is. And so that's kind of the solution we'll have if you're using 9.3 or earlier. And I think Brendan has something he was going to say.
Another thing I wanted to mention, in 10.0 we will actually be releasing a slightly new feature where we're going to allow you to debug web data connectors from within Tableau. Big caveat there, this is going to be an unsupported feature. It's going to require you starting desktop with a very specific flag. It's only going to work on Windows. It's something that we built in a hackathon and we thought would be very useful to some developers. So we're putting it out there, but it's not up to the quality bar we're calling this a supported feature. But I think it'll be very helpful in some scenarios like this one.
So the way it'll work is you'll see the WebKit debug tools for your data gathering phase on your web data connector. So it'll be just kind of look like your normal, probably like Safari's debug tools. And you'll be able to actually dig in and see exactly how your connector
set breakpoints, I can watch variables,
Yeah.
I can see my objects and
monitor the
values.
network traffic going in and out. Yeah, so I think that we've definitely felt this pain ourselves, and adding that in as Brendan said, a completely unsupported feature that is liable to have a lot of issues with it, but we've already seen a lot of benefits from using it ourselves.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we're least happy about with that, right, is just how long it takes for those WebKit developer tools to actually start up. Like it's just, and it's not even anything I think that we can control. It's just sort of the environment that we're using, and yeah. So I think that'll make a big difference.
But if you want to get going now, check out the YouTube video we have on our channel that very much goes into this how to debug when things work in desktop or in the simulator, but not in the product.
Yeah, we've got a link to that YouTube channel here in the deck in a few minutes. Okay, so another question here: is there any way for me to debug my connector in Tableau? I think we just dealt with that. So, how can I use my web data connector with Tableau online?
Yeah, so currently, as you all are aware, in order to get a web data connector to refresh on a server, you have to use this import process. With Tableau Online, it is Tableau server, and so there's no way for a third-party developer to go and get their connector to run directly on Tableau Online. For now, the only solution is to run your web data connectors through our online sync tool. This is a separate client that we have that basically refreshes your web data connector from your local machine and pushes the results to Tableau Online. So right now, that's the only supported solution. In the future, we are definitely exploring other options to get these connectors to run it online, but we don't have any current information to share with that.
Yeah. Is there, let's see, Jaram is asking, Prashanti had a follow-up. Is it in the 10.0 beta release? So this is back to this debugging tool that we just talked about. So it will be in a beta release, but we don't know which one yet.
I'm not sure if it's in the current beta release that is out now. It will be in the next one.
Yeah.
I can say that for certain.
Okay.
And we will we put on the forums how to the command line argument you have to pass to Tableau.
Yeah.
To make it work.
Okay, so the next question from Diram is there any plan of web data connector using Google V8 engine for JavaScript?
Well, eventually, I think we will be changing our browser control that we are using. I'm not entirely sure what the JavaScript engine that's going to be. But we're planning on upgrading from our current WebKit-based browser to a more modern browser. And at that point, I think there's a good chance it'll be based off of Chromium and then V8 as well. That is
something that's still,
time in the future.
Not going to be this year.
Still under investigation. Yeah.
It's definitely something that we want to support. We understand the JavaScript engine that we're using now is kind of slow and missing a lot of modern language features.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely something we want to do and is on our roadmap, but there's a lot of external concerns from us that we need to get through first to be able to upgrade this.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm going to make a last call for questions. So if you've been sitting there trying to get in the last question, now's your time to get that shared into the window. We've got another question via email here. Are there plans to support a marketplace of web data connectors?
That is definitely on our roadmap. We do not have any specific details to share at this time about that, but it's definitely where we want to go long term. Yeah, I guess. Sorry, I was assuming this question was more about an official marketplace. We do immediately have plans to kind of improve our community section on GitHub. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, that's just a fat README list. In the future, we'll be able, if you submit a pull request that has a hosted link to your web data connector, we're actually going to go ahead and package that in a build and put it in this nice browsable gallery format. And of course, all those connectors that are on that community portal, they're not going to be a supported connector by Tableau because they're external that'll help in the short term kind of to solve the problem of, hey, has someone already built this connector that I'm looking for? Right now, we kind of have connectors scattered over various places in our forums on GitHub. So we're trying to kind of bring those all together. That's short term. Long term, there will be more, but nothing to share yet.
Okay, great. So I think this might be our last announcement for today before we wrap up. We're going to do a hackathon. So if you joined us at TC at the Tableau conference last year in Las Vegas, we had an awesome hackathon at that event, and it was in person. We got people together in a room for a few hours. People created web data connectors. We demoed them. We had prizes. It was a ton of fun. We heard nothing but great things from the community. And we actually have had, I was just telling the guys here in the room before we started the call, I've had multiple people from the Tableau community reach out to me unsolicited and say, hey, are we doing another hackathon at TC in Austin this November? Because I got a bunch of ideas for different things. So we're definitely kind of thinking about that for TC, but we thought, hey, in the meantime, why not do another one on the web data connector? So we can't get everyone in the world together in one place. So we're going to do this as a virtual event. It's going to kick off June 1st, and it's going to run through June 19th. You're like, oh, why 19 days? Well, it turned out if we did on the 19th, there was like an extra weekend for people to work. So we thought, let's get another weekend in there. And basically, anyone who submits a working connector, now again, caveat here is using the new API. So you can take your existing web data connector and convert it to the new API, or just do a net new one that's going to take advantage of multi-tables. So submit a working connector, you're going to get a prize. And it's going to be a small prize, but it's going to be cool. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Quick, another caveat. By submit here, we mean use our new submission process to submit a pull request to GitHub to get your connector in our community portal. So that's right. Kind of the submission process.
Yep. So as Brandon said, you're going to submit it via GitHub. You're going to give us your name. You're going to link to your hosted V2 web data connector. So we have to be able to like hit that URL and be able to run it. And this is optional but encouraged. Also post a link to the source code, again, in the spirit of like community and people learning and tweaking and hacking. And then we would say a 90-second demo video, again, optional, but it could help us better understand your vision for this connector if it's a more esoteric, kind of data source or whatever. So also, we aim to have prizes as exciting as this gift right here, but we are going to have some exciting prizes for the best projects submitted. So again, everyone who submits a connector will get a prize. Keep your eye on the developer forum for more information about this hackathon, but we're really excited about the new API, and we want to just, give you guys a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a carrot, if you will, to help us test the new API. Of course, we want feedback and know how it goes. So let's see, we've got Craig's asking about this hackathon. It's during TC London, and if we could somehow link up the two. I don't know, Craig. I would have to talk to the TC London folks to see if there's anything we might do there.
I'll volunteer to go.
Yeah, I'll go. All
right, so we've got mentors that would go, it sounds like. So yeah, so Craig, we'll see. Don't want to get your hopes up, but I'll inquire and see if we could do something more at TC. Okay, so just we're on the home stretch. Craig offered up his place. So we can say his flat. So we've got a survey. The first URL is a short version of the bottom URL. Some people in our last office hours said they weren't able to use URL shortened links from their company internet. So if you could, please just take 30 seconds and share your thoughts about this office hours. We got a lot of good feedback and suggestions and ideas from the last one that we did on the REST API. And so we want to kind of keep these going as touch points with the community and make sure that you guys are equipped with the information to be really successful using our things, and also keep that feedback coming to us so we know what to work on next. So the last slide here, there in the bottom again is that SurveyMonkey link. If you want to just grab that and actually, you know what I could do? Well, I'm thinking of it. Let me just paste. I'm going to paste the long URL into the chat window, so you guys could just click on that and fill out the survey. So again, just to wrap up here, please use the new V2 API. Make a new web data connector, convert your existing one, give us feedback. What's the development experience like? What can be better? What do you like? What don't you like? Did you find any bugs? Okay, and just we're committed to making this awesome, and we need your help and feedback to keep us honest and keep it moving forward. So if you haven't yet joined the Tableau beta, go to tableau.com/getbeta. The registration process is really quick, and it's going to enable you to get the latest versions of Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. We've got some other APIs that are coming. We've got some new REST APIs. We've got some new changes to the JavaScript API that are coming in a future beta. So Web Data Connector is just one piece of our developer platform here at Tableau. But get in the beta. You're going to know what's new when, and you're going to be able to try it out. So the developer portal, developers.tableau.com, that's the place to go to get docs and sample code for all of our APIs. There's a community forum there. And then Sam alluded to, or he mentioned, hey, we've got these videos on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search for #DataDev, you'll find the Tableau channel. We've got 2 playlists. We've got one for Web Data Connector and one for the JavaScript API. So those videos are available. Some good content there from the team going into some of the finer points about using the Web Data Connector. So I'll just leave this slide up here as resources. With that, I think we're about half an hour ahead of schedule. We didn't know how many questions people were going to have, but I think we got through them. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at the virtual Web Data Connector Hackathon and at a future office hours event. Thanks to the guys here in the room for sharing your knowledge. And everyone, hope you have a good day, and hope to see you soon.